Now, one man who certainly knows how to draw a crowd these days is the Pope. Benedict XVI is in Madrid for a 4-day visit, kicking off with World Youth Day, an event that's been running since the 1980s. Well, an estimated 1.5 million people are expected to visit the event. And with that in mind, I'll be asking tonight if faith could be the answer to many of the ills plaguing modern society. Or, on the other hand, if too much focus on the afterlife means we neglect the chance to make life on earth better for everybody. Do religious leaders have something valuable to add to public debate? And just how much God do we want our politicians to have? Just some of the questions I'll be talking about tonight. Well, my guests are Pierre Whelan. He's the bishop in charge of Episcopal churches across Europe. Tom Hennigan is the religion editor at the news agency Reuters. Myra Mardi is an author whose works include An Islam of the Heart and The Quran for Children. And in London tonight, Andrew Copson is the chief executive of the British Humanist Association. Many thanks indeed to you all for being with us. Now, we'll hear from them in a moment. First, though, wherever the Pope goes, controversy tends to follow. And there were huge protests against his visit today in Spain. Many said it was wrong for the government to spend money on hosting such an event at a time of economic hardship.
We believe that in a non-denominational state like ours, the deployment of public funds for the Catholic religion is inconceivable.
It's a real shame that this country must finance the Pope's visit. It's not normal. If he wants to come, he should pay for the trip himself.
Spending this much money when there's so much hunger in the world, and on top of that with my money. I would rather see my money go to Somalia.
Well, let's find out what's going on in Madrid tonight. Steve Marshall is there attending the event. Thanks for being with us, Steve. Just tell us a bit about your experiences so far and tell us why have you come to Madrid for this event?
Well, sure. Well, my name is Steve Marshall. I'm a seminarian for the Eudist Fathers. That's a French community that was started in Normandy a few hundred years ago. I tell you, my experience has been fantastic. Just getting to be part of a giant 2 million strong international family has really been amazing.
And what do you think of the protests that have been happening in Madrid over the past 24 hours?
You know, I think I've been pretty isolated from the protests. We haven't seen anything of them as the pilgrims, at least. We did see the strike on the metro line today. Thanks be to God, it didn't last very long. But you know, we're living in a tough time to be people of faith, right?
Now, a lot of things have changed in Spain over the past 10 years. Gay marriage has been legalised, for one thing. Also, divorce and abortion have become easier. What do you think of that? Do you think Spain is becoming perhaps too liberal these days?
I mean, I think this is something that's happening all over. I mean, I know in the U.S., there's a real hot battle right now in every single state about gay marriage, and the fight to make abortion illegal has been a losing battle for quite a while. So I think it does seem like Spain is obviously getting more liberal, you could call it, but I think it's happening all around the world, at least in the western part of the world. Let me correct that.
All right. Steve Marshall, enjoy your time in Madrid and many thanks for being with us.
Great. Thank you much. God bless.
Bishop Whelan, if I could start with you, if I may. Now, the Pope has been to Spain 3 times since he became Pope. It's the country he's visited the most. Right. Why do you think it's so important to him?
Well, first of all, there's a long, close relationship between the Vatican and Spain. And it was very recently only that the Concordat between the Vatican and Spain was invalidated. So I think it's very important for him to reinforce the prestige and presence of the Roman Catholic Church in Spain at this time.
Andrew Copson in London, if I could come to you. 1.5 million people set to attend this event over the next few days. That's a huge turnout. Not many organisations, I certainly can't think of any, that can motivate that many young people. This is surely a positive thing, is it not?
Well, obviously the Catholic Church, both in Spain and around the world, is a very organised force. It has schools that can be given the day off. It has congregations. It has a system of organisation that many civil society or trade union organisations would envy. But I don't think that motivation in itself is necessarily a good thing. It depends what you're being motivated towards or motivated for. And the reason why we had tens of thousands of people protesting about the Pope's state visit to London last year, for example, was because of the things that the Catholic Church has been organised to do that many people are against. The violation of the reproductive and sexual health rights of women, the violation of the human rights of lesbian and gay people, and the way that the Holy See uses its power on the international stage to really work against those people's human rights. And that's why I think a lot of people in your film just now were mentioning how wrong it is that the state should fund these sorts of visits. And I think many people agree with that. In Britain, for example, opinion polls showed that even many Catholics agreed that it was wrong for the state to fund a visit of the Pope.
And that's been the controversial issue, hasn't it, about whether or not the state should pay for something like this when so many people are struggling at the moment. But the Pope has offered up some solutions himself on the economy, hasn't he?
Yes, he said on the plane going over there, he was talking about the economy and saying that needed more regulation and needed more emphasis on the human side of our life as economic beings, not just on profit. This is something he said before in an encyclical. But the issue of the cost is, of course, a good one for anyone who wants to criticize them to latch on to. I think, in fact, that this Spanish state is not going to be paying too much. They're paying for the security, but most of the rest is actually being paid for by the pilgrims, the church.
50 million, I think, is the price tag.
Yeah, and they also have corporations sponsoring it. There were Spanish priests who wrote a protest letter against all this high-level corporate sponsorship. So, it's not as if the Spanish state is carrying the whole bill for that.
Myra Mardy, what are your thoughts on what's going on in Madrid tonight? This is pretty expensive at a time when a lot of people in Spain are struggling. 20% of the population unemployed, a lot of them young people. Do you think it's appropriate for Spain to be putting on an event like this?
Let me make 2 points to start with. That level of gathering, number of people, we know in Islam, we have it every year in Mecca. The only difference is that there's no pope, no symbol, no head. But there is that sort of reunion, let's say. I personally am always afraid of that sort of million people gatherings. You can never know what happens, what exactly is in the back of the mind of all these youngsters. Certainly the ones we have heard, are well-intentioned, and they are there for a reason and a purpose and so forth. There's always somebody who's there to make fun, to have fun, because it's their first travel abroad, because they're youngsters. I mean, I'm not convinced the sheer number of people in such gatherings means much.
Bishop Whelan, you run a programme, don't you, where you helped some young people from Iraq, young Christians, to travel to this event. What do you think people are there for? What do you think they get from it?
Yes, well, this is a program to bring Iraqis threatened with death because of their faith, Christian or other, to France for refuge. And 30 of our young refugees asked if they could go to Madrid, and some French Catholics made that possible. So what I think they're getting out of it is the opportunity to be with people who enjoy being together as Catholics, as people of faith. And for young people, for instance, when you go to Taizé, where thousands of young people visit every week in Taizé, it's a big party for teenagers. And I don't think it's always necessarily as conservative as some people would like to say that it is. But
and what goes on at these events? A lot of prayer, a lot of meeting other like-minded people.
I mean, there are the official events. There's the big parties with the Pope and the Great Mass at the end. But I recall we were talking about earlier ones, the one in Denver with John Paul II. It was this huge love fest where they were crying out, "John Paul, we love you," and he was responding, "John Paul, he loves you." I don't think it's very sophisticated in terms of some great theological, push for these young people. But they just like getting together and having a big party. I used to when I was a kid. I still vaguely remember something about that.
Andrew Copson, what do you say to that? It all seems pretty innocent, does it not? Young people getting together, especially when just a week or so ago we were talking about young people doing terrible damage to property in London. I mean, it seems that when young people do something good and positive, we don't talk so much about it.
Well, coming together to have a party, of course, is fun. I mean, that's great. I've just got back from the World Humanist Congress in Oslo, where there were young people from humanist organisations all over the world who'd gathered for a summer camp and a party and so on. That's fine. But I don't see what direct relevance that has to the more political questions about the actions of the Holy See and whether or not they're the suitable sort of actions of a state that should be honoured with a state visit and have that state visit paid for. And I don't see what it's got to do about the wider questions of religion and society. Obviously, young people coming together and enjoying each other's company and having fun at the same time is a very positive thing. How could anyone disagree with that? It says, people might say. But again, it depends why they're coming together. And although it may be the case that the Pope has said some things that many of us may agree with about our economic life and the need for regulation to be more human-centred, and although it may be the case that young people are coming together and having fun, I think we still have to question many of the policies that the Holy See pursues, which are profoundly anti-human, anti-democratic, anti-equality and anti-human rights, and that those too should be seen as part of the picture. And for many people, myself included, it makes the honouring of the Pope as a head of state for a state visit entirely unsuitable.
Bishop, obviously you don't represent the Catholic Church, but you do represent Christianity. What are your thoughts on what you just heard there?
Well, I think it's wrong to paint the Catholic Church in monochromatic colors. I mean, the kinds of questions, the violations of human rights that our friend in London is talking about have been tremendously, over a long period of time, addressed very forcefully by Roman Catholic workers, theologians, politicians, all kinds of people. You think of Dorothy Day and her contribution years ago to the labor movement. The whole issue of Humanae Vitae and the question of family planning. I mean, there have been very, very articulate Roman Catholic voices that have criticized that have criticized the issues of women and so forth. To paint the Catholic Church like this, I think, is wrong.
I wouldn't want to say that every individual Catholic was in agreement with the policies of the Holy See and with the Pope as the head of state. That would be very far from being what I would say. I'm sure that some of the protesters in Spain are Catholics themselves, as they were in London. But it was the Holy See as a state that stood in the way at the UN of having women's reproductive rights recognised, that has stood in the way of having the human rights of lesbian and gay people recognised. So it's the Holy See as a structure and as a state that I would want people to be speaking against. Certainly not necessarily Catholicism as a religion or individual Catholics. I think that's an important distinction, and it's more than just the cost of a visit in euros. It's the principle of recognising a state which, in its actions as a state, does these things, however well-intentioned and progressive the views of some of its members lower down the hierarchy might be.
Tom Hennigan.
Speaking as a journalist, it's very hard to get all of the different topics concerning the Catholic Church under one cover on something like this, because it has so many levels. Of course, there are. Whenever you see the Pope, you think about the Pope's teachings about. You think about the scandals, and there have been some devastating scandals of the sexual abuse in the Catholic Church in Europe for these past few years, and elsewhere in America as well, of course. But if you look at it from the bottom up, you see all these people here who come there. They know that. But they have a faith that says we want to go and we want to be together, as Bishop Whelan said, and they also want to have fun. These kids are out there. I've been to these meetings, and you see it there. And you'll see one version on television, and that won't cover everything. You might read another thing in a religious publication, and that won't cover anything. Our friend in London will say something else, and that won't cover everything either, what we say. So it's incredibly complex. And I think it just doesn't come across because there's too many people are going for too many different reasons.
It's a very complex issue, and Myra, isn't it a human need to kind of fulfil these spiritual questions, to gather like this, to have conversations about that in big groups? It's kind of a human need, is it not?
I'll answer you by saying I'm a secular Muslim, i.e. I have theological needs. I need a God. I need guidance. I need somebody to retribute me and somebody above me. I need this. But at the same time, I need a clear separation between state and religion. And this is something very valuable that allows me to say, as a Muslim, I'm still a citizen, therefore I can say that the Pope is free to say whatever he wants within the religion. The only thing that I would not agree with is anything touching health. And this is perhaps because I'm a scientist. My background does not allow me to accept anything from any religious being,
so contraception
whatever.
Is an obvious
contraception,
example.
but also AIDS, protection from AIDS, etc., etc. That is the limit to which I will accept to go to any religion.
But are we not missing a trick if we keep religious leaders out of political life? If we say, yes, it's all very well and good, you can talk about religion, you can do this, but if we keep them away from the political debate?
Well, if you really believe in a superior being, you can believe that he created a mind that can reflect and think and act in two different levels, separating things, the religious side and the purely human, everyday life side.
You're nodding your head, Bishop. That's something you agree with?
Yes, in dialogue with the Ayatollahs in Iran that I've been part of in Tehran and in Washington the past few years, the point has been made that if you do not separate religion and state, eventually religion becomes corrupt. They don't like to agree with that, but they don't say anything in answer to it because they know it's true. Whatever religion it is, I don't care. The founding values, the basic values of that religion become the slave of power. And power corrupts. And it will corrupt religion and all of its values and twist it in its own interests. And you see that. I mean, human history is full of that. And not so long ago, it was inconceivable that religion and state could be separate. So I think it's a great advance in humanity and for religion that we now, most of us understand, that religion and state must be separated. That doesn't mean that in the Spanish state investing some money in the arrival of 1.5 million tourists over a weekend is a stupid thing. I mean, they're going to make a lot more money, just like the English haven't stopped building the Olympics because they know they're going to get their money back, even as it was hard times.
But there are they are, for example, getting reduced fares on transport services. They're getting to stay in reduced hotel rooms. There has been some money spent on encouraging this.
Well, sure. But they're going to get a lot more money back. That's what the bet they're making. And I'm saying the Olympics is the same bet in London. And if we had gotten them here in Paris, we'd be making the same bet too. So.
All right. Okay. We're going to have to take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment with the latest international headlines and the second part of tonight's debate. Don't go away.